Howdy, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Texas Signal SignalCast. I'm your host, Joe Desautels, and I'm here with my co-host, Jessica Montoya Coggins. Hello, Jessica.
Hey guys.
And I am joining you from the mind of Ted Cruz, as Jessica pointed out. We
his
actually,
virtual background shows him on a beach right now, and so when it popped up, I just thought of Ted Cruz in Mexico.
that's hilarious. And we had a really great meme today on our social media from Ted Cruz from the Biden speech when he apparently was like falling asleep the whole time. He couldn't stay awake during the speech. But and then we made this our team made a funny meme of like him with like what he was thinking, and it was just he was dreaming about being on the beach in Cancun. So it's pretty funny. Still lots of material to make fun of Ted Cruz for. I don't know if you got to watch all of the speech. I know you watched some of it, but I was really impressed. And it's just like such, you think about the 4 previous years, what we had to go through. And you know what? To be quite honest, it's nice to have a president where you can fall asleep while they're talking and wake up and there not be some crazy disaster or something you have to just be shocked and awed by that they might have said or be planning to do. So, I think Biden should really take that as a badge of honor that he's so policy focused and oriented towards jobs and infrastructure that it just puts people like Ted Cruz to sleep. So
That is true. My sleeping patterns have changed since Joe Biden took office. I no longer wake up in the morning and think, what did he tweet? Because I know he really didn't tweet anything.
yeah, absolutely. And I think Trump must have had some kind of response. I know the Republicans had a response. They put up Tim Scott, the African American senator from South Carolina, and just
It's a very thankless job, to be honest. I think somebody pointed out that no person who's given that rebuttal has ever gone on to have not done very well in a subsequent presidential election. And I think probably one of the main criticisms for Scott's speech was it was not really so much a response to Biden, but almost kind of like a 2024 pitch for him. So we'll see.
And the key takeaway was his line that says, "America is not a racist country." That was really the only line I saw repeated over and over that he said from that. And to your point about it being sort of the thankless kind of job, it's kind of the political equivalent to being on the cover of the Madden video game. I don't know if you've heard of the Madden curse, but
Oh
it
yeah,
seems
yeah.
like every time they put somebody on the Madden cover, they get hurt the next year or that following year. And so, yeah, I totally agree. Like, I can't even remember really the last time they put somebody up to do that speech. It's always somebody, Democrats and Republicans both do it. And it's always usually somebody they want to like kind of put out into the front and say, this is who we are. This is what we represent. And it makes perfect sense that the Republicans will put up really I think the lone black Republican in the Senate because of all, of course, the things that are going on right now, the Chauvin murder trial verdict. You could see on the right building up to that, they were so ready for riots in the street because they had you could tell they had all their materials prepped and their talking points prepped about riots in the street and burning cities down, and it didn't happen. And they were so disappointed that it didn't happen. And so the best they could do is put this guy up there and say, hey, look, we're not racist. Like, even though all of our policies might negatively affect people of color, it's not our intention to do that. But yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I feel like Tim Scott is not really I don't really see him being able to pull it off in 2024. And the polls that I've seen lately are still have Trump at the top, and it's much less enthusiasm for Trump. It's gone from like 80% down to like 65% or something like that are like certain they would vote for Trump again. But I think Laura Trump was interested in running in South Carolina for the other Senate seat, and they
In North Carolina.
Oh, it's North Carolina?
Yeah, North Carolina. Yeah.
Even better, because then we'd have a much better chance of making sure that didn't happen from the Democratic side, and we don't have to rely on the Republicans to actually put up someone, because as we've seen, they refuse to stand up to any Trump. So I'm sure Laura Trump probably fits into that
Yeah, a friend of mine just got hired for someone who's running on the Democratic side, and so so it's just like kind of familiar with that race right now.
Yeah. But, of course, Trump is he's still out there. He's still very influential. As a matter of fact, I know you've been covering the Texas 6 race to replace former Congressman Wright. And it looks like his wife is the sort of heir apparent to that seat. And Trump just recently, endorsed her. And did you do a story on that? Or I remember
Yeah,
you.
yeah, we've been covering this. It's a special election, and so probably one of the more marquee things that's going to happen on Saturday, and it is most assuredly going to go to a runoff because there are over 20 candidates in the race. It's a jungle primary, so the top two will go off to a runoff, assuming nobody gets over 50%, and kind of with that many people, that's very likely. But yeah, no, Susan Wright did get that endorsement a bit late, came in on the second to last day of early voting. But no, she had it. And it's actually kind of a big blow because there's a number of Republican candidates in that race who were really, really, really tying themselves to Trump. You
Mhm.
had several people that worked in his administration. One guy, Brian Harrison, he's dropped several $100,000 into that race, his own money. He was an HHS administrator, very proud of the fact that he was a part of defunding Planned Parenthood, super MAGA. We've talked
Super
about
MAGA. I
super
love it.
MAGA. We've talked about Big Dan Rodimer before.
Oh,
Rodimer ran for Congress in Nevada, had Trump's endorsement last November. He flew down to Texas to run in this special election. Kind of infamously didn't even kind of know where it was, so he filed in the wrong place. But he was, saying like, "Oh, I'm the Trump guy," and so yeah. But no, Susan Wright got this endorsement, so we will see.
Well, there's nothing I love to hear more than Republicans spending six figures against other Republicans. I mean, to be quite honest, that's the best news I've heard all day. So, um, yeah, I mean, there's, May 1st. This is Saturday. May 1st is election day all over the state of Texas. So there is the special election in North Texas, but there's stuff on the ballot all over the state. We did a special podcast on some of the things that are going on in Austin because of how it tends to affect and show up elsewhere. But, I think one thing we might not have mentioned was the proposition in Lubbock that's right now to create a sanctuary city for the unborn. Texas is not a sanctuary city for the living, so I don't really know what it looks like to be a sanctuary city for the unborn. But
Well, interestingly, Lubbock, so there are several small municipalities around the country and a few
mhm,
in Texas that have adopted this, which is, by the way, like just blatantly unconstitutional, but
right.
that's a whole other thing. However, Lubbock would be the largest city and actually the only city that does have an abortion clinic. So Planned Parenthood reopened in Lubbock a few months ago, and abortion services did return about 10, like right when early voting was starting on this proposition. So interestingly, also the city council voted on this last year. They unanimously voted against it, even though several council members said, I support this personally, but again, this is blatantly unconstitutional. We're going to get, sued to the wazoo about this, and that likely will happen if that were to pass. So that has been, very obviously, with all of the anti-choice bills we've seen in the Texas legislature, this is, I think, an escalation of that. So we will see if Lubbock does actually vote for that proposition.
Yeah, and I have a friend that's working on that campaign, and actually in my day job, I work for a data firm and stuff, and we're actually working on that as well, and we're feeding, ads and things like that to defeat this proposition, and we're targeting the university students there, who probably have no idea what's really going on with the city, but it's really important. And especially in light of like what's going on at the Capitol right now, there is a lot of discussion, a big scandal happening right now where there's a couple of different investigations over a lobbyist allegedly gave a date rape pill to alleged staffer. And so I just think it kind of highlights the horrific nature of the bills that they have there so that you can sue like a rapist would literally be able to sue the person he raped or in their doctor if that person had an abortion. And you see things like this going on at the same time, and it really kind of puts in perspective, what their priorities are, and basically they're constantly targeting the most vulnerable populations who have the hardest time fighting back.
I mean, that
And
that bill you referenced at the Texas Capitol, it's incredibly, as you said, it's worded in a way where anyone affiliated with any sort of abortion services could be sued. I mean, that could also include sort of the telemedicine provider. This could even
oh
it
yeah,
is
that's right.
worded so unspecifically, like if you were to take a rideshare service somewhere, like it is, and it would sort of give, if a potential rapist the ability to sue for parental rights. And I think some people noted on social media that the sponsor of that House bill, Shelby Slauson, was one of the most vocal people denouncing the Capitol culture. And so she had
Hmm.
a sort of a tweet one day where she's like, "We're going to wear pink in solidarity." And it's
Yeah,
like, well, I don't really know if that's
yeah. How
necessarily
gross.
what.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there.
yeah, it's pretty gross.
That's,
This,
that's
this
definitely.
isn't this isn't Mean Girls. We don't need that.
Yeah, and it's always them. They want to be the first out there to say that they support, women. This is unbelievable. It just kind of reminds me of that line from Casablanca where the guy comes in and is like, I can't believe that there's gambling going on in here.
You're winning, sir.
Yeah, I hear you're winning. Yeah, exactly. It's like what? So yeah, I mean, obviously, Republicans love nothing more than spending tons of money and tying up the courts in a bunch of BS. And no different for our friend and Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is apparently got a whole nother slew of lawsuits against the Biden administration. And, it was Abbott, our current governor, who he used to be Attorney General, and he famously said, I wake up in the morning, I sue the federal government, and then I go home. And it's such an awful thing, that's literally, he thinks this is a great line. And so a little bit more about this. Paxton is suing over immigration, but I think one of the big things here is this outside group that he's working with for these lawsuits.
Sure. Yeah. So Paxton really did set the tone, similar to Abbott, where it wasn't even 72 hours into the Biden administration when he filed the first immigration related lawsuit. That was for a deportation moratorium. So that is currently tied up in the courts. But yes, so last week, Paxton filed a new immigration federal lawsuit. This one was actually using a lot of wording regarding COVID-19, saying that the migrant facilities were facilitating spread of COVID-19 throughout Texas. Essentially, we need to start sending people back to Mexico because of that. But there was an outside group that was this outside council, and it was called America First Legal Foundation. So America Legal First Foundation is led by Stephen Miller. For those aren't familiar, Stephen Miller was a senior advisor to the Trump campaign, later became a senior advisor in the Trump administration. He is a notoriously anti-immigrant person. You can go to the Southern Poverty Law Center. They have a whole hate watch dedicated to this individual. Truly one of the people, he was truly kind of responsible for the child separation policy. But he has now started this legal group, and it is providing the outside legal counsel for Paxton's lawsuit. So while Stephen Miller is leading this organization, it has a whole board of directors filled with former Trump appointees, Mark Meadows, who was a former chief of staff, sort of a House Freedom Caucus member, very, very right wing, the former head of the OMB, Russ Vought, also ultra right wing. So yes, this is kind of the group that has, I think, trying to position itself as a sort of a right-wing counter to the ACLU. And so yes, our taxpayer dollars are essentially paying for Stephen Miller and,
Oh,
and this group.
I mean, I'm pretty well trained at this point to not think it can get worse. But every time it does, I still just have to shake my head and like Steven, like these grifters, they just find they just latch on to kind of like the next thing. And apparently he was already setting this whole thing up, during the last days of the Trump administration, and to find a new place for him. I mean, he's a really young guy, so he is
Shockingly young.
yeah.
John Oliver has a kind of famous segment where he doesn't quite look his age, and so John Oliver sort of lists like all the people that are like third. Like he's like he is the same age as Nicki Minaj, and
Oh.
it is it's funny, but also maybe kind of not. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Just thinking how much longer this guy has, to just be awful for the rest of his life. But, so you were also mentioning that Sid Miller, our buddy Sid Miller, is also using this organization for his lawsuits. And it makes perfect sense, right? Because Sid Miller's lawsuit is over discrimination, of course, discrimination of white people in Biden's farm aid bill, where he says, well, white farmers can't get this aid or something like that. It's maybe targeted towards, people of color getting, farmers and getting them aid and assistance. And so he is suing over this. And so, Stephen Miller's being well known as sort of white supremacist, or at the very least white nationalist sympathizer. It makes perfect sense.
And we should note that for Sid Miller's lawsuit, that's actually in his personal capacity, not as the agricultural commissioner of the state of Texas, but he does have a large farm ranch up somewhere in Texas, and so he basically is citing this provision in the relief bill that sort of stipulates that there certain amount of relief has to go to farmers of color. I think it's not even necessarily worded in a way, that is the argument, that it is discriminatory towards white farmers. And sure enough, Miller's legal counsel is that America First Legal Foundation. So I have a feeling we're probably not going to see the last of them. This kind of seems like the beginning of a long-standing trend they might have in Texas, which so we probably have to get used to that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're probably right. And in the age of Biden and sort of Democrat majorities, we're going to see more legislation that is progressive, and they're going to just have more lawsuits. That's going to be sort of how they deal with this. And it's quite
my big question with Sid Miller. I don't know if you ever saw Borat 2, but in the trailer for Borat 2, they definitely showed Sid Miller with opposite Sacha Baron Cohen, but the actual movie, he wasn't in it. So I'm kind of waiting for that director's cut, if we'll ever get that.
That's a good point. Yeah, you know what? I remember seeing that the little clip or something, like there was a little bit of a short outtake they published, and he made light of it, Sid Miller himself. But I did watch the movie and totally forgot, because I never, he never came up on the screen, now that you mention it. But yeah,
that's my Sid Miller story.
Yeah. We all have got one, I guess, at this point. But speaking of the Biden plans, his infrastructure plan does what looks like people are intuiting that some of this money could be used for the Ike Dike. And for folks who don't know what the Ike Dike is, that's just sort of the colloquial name for the coastal barrier that they want to build, that many people want to build along to protect essentially what is the Houston port, that would protect against storm surge from hurricanes. And there was tons of flooding from Ike. Obviously, there was tons of flooding from Harvey. And the idea here is, and these dikes are already in real. They already use them in other places in Europe and things like that, where they're a little more advanced and seeing infrastructure as something that's needed for everyone. But the interesting thing to me about this is that Republicans have spent so much time trying to say that Biden is trying to kill the energy industry, and his climate change plans, the Green New Deal, and all that is going to kill. But really, this is about it's about jobs. But the first thing that happens when they talk about a storm surge coming to Houston is they shut those plants down, and there's lots of burn off that happens. I mean, it's super expensive, not just having them not operating, but literally the process of shutting those plants down is incredibly expensive. And then you see oil spike, literally global oil prices spike when Houston shuts its oil industry down. And so by building the Ike Dike, they would, in theory, and hopefully be able to prevent having to do that, and prevent obviously all the damage, the billions of dollars worth of property damage that happens, lives lost, and all that from these types of storms. And so, a lot of folks in Texas have been talking about this. My father was on the select committee for the Ike Dike when they were originally doing the research for it, and this could be a really good thing for the Texas economy. And when they asked Trump about it, he laughed, and he even came to Houston in 2019 for a rally, and he brought it up. And all the Texas Republicans like Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick were in the crowd, and he laughed at him. He said, Abbott and these guys, they call me up and they want all this money. They want $10 billion for something that may work, may not work. They want to build a wall out in the ocean. He thought it was a joke. And so it's just really unbelievable.
To be fair, I think this was also the same individual who thought you could nuke a hurricane. So that I'm not sure he is really equipped to understand these sort of concepts. But no, I think you're completely spot on. The number one word that Biden used in his address to Congress was jobs. And, one of Abbott's big criticisms of all of this is, that all these talks from Biden, these are job killers. This is going to destroy the Texas economy. What really destroys the Texas economy are these once in a lifetime storms that we're seeing multiple times in one's lifetime. I think Houston has endured enough that we know. I don't think this city can I don't think it cannot not build the Ike Dike. This is, I think, something that probably should have been done a long time ago. And now I think time is of the essence. So if we can actually get this done, protect jobs, protect energy jobs, it seems to make sense. I think only if you're a Texas Republican does it not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a sad state. But I think we're just beyond the point where logic, facts, and all that stuff really plays into it, and certainly science. And that's just really unfortunate, obviously.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown me is there is a whole lot of people in our state who just do not trust science, do not believe in science. Nope.
Yeah. And the thing I don't ever understand is like, who do they trust, and how do they all end up on the same page that science is what's wrong? And we see it all the time, and we're seeing it more and more. The total disrespect and lack of trust of experts in general across the board. I mean, the whole discussion about we can't call Jill Biden Dr. Biden because she is a PhD and not a medical doctor just kind of brings that home, that they don't, for the past few years, they've tried to say professors and people with advanced degrees are liberal, which, okay. Maybe that says something about when you become an expert about something and you start thinking about it differently and looking at facts and really weighing that as opposed to just your opinion. But yeah, this has been a long campaign of sort of just attacking experts and people who are what you would think are the authority on subject matter. And why they've chosen to trust Republican politicians, I'm not really sure. I don't know what their credentials are other than having an R next to their name on any of these things. But
I mean, or even, we've had some well-known folks in Texas. And Joe Rogan was recently on his podcast basically saying his advice to a healthy 21-year-old is to not get the vaccine. I don't know about you, but I'm probably going to trust someone like Dr. Fauci over the former host of Fear Factor, who also appeared in like the Kevin James movie Zookeeper. I think I'm going to stick with Dr. Fauci on that. But no, I mean, that has consequences. We've seen parts of Texas where I think the level of population that has been vaccinated, it's kind of stagnating around 10 to 15% in some of those rural counties, and that's not good. Especially if people really do want us to get back to normal and to start, getting back to the things that we all want to do. There's big consequences to having a huge swath of the population that doesn't trust scientific authority figures.
Right. And it just breeds a lot of paranoia and, of authority and people, who are mostly just trying to do the right thing. And, that kind of brings up to me, voting and things like that, because a lot of these, folks who are running elections are the same way. They're just following the rules, trying to do the right thing. A lot of them, it's really patriotic and it's a great civic duty to participate in the electoral process. And these people have just been demonized over and over again, lied about completely, people claiming they're cheating and they're changing results. And these people are just going to work, doing their jobs just like everybody else. And the punishment for cheating an election is so incredibly harsh. Nobody would in their right mind would risk, federal prosecution, felonies for a second vote, to vote twice or something like that. And if anybody was doing it at any scale that they've claimed, we would have so much evidence. And so far, none. As a matter of fact, you probably saw that the feds just raided Rudy's place. And so, man, that's so great. He deserves everything. They played this clip that was him saying, we're doing this audit, and, if we don't find anything, we're going to look really stupid. But if we find something, there's a lot of people that are going to go to jail. And, I think he was right about both. I think they're going to both look stupid, and a lot of people are going to go to jail. It's just going to be those same people that look stupid. They're just going to be looking stupid in jail, is what, it's kind of shaping out to look like. But here in Texas, of course, we've been following the voter suppression bills. There's a couple of them. There's SB 7, there's HB 6. The sort of, at least as far as I'm caught up to, like literally up till today, what happened was they essentially gutted SB 7 and replaced it with the language from HB 6. And so they're trying to get one of these bills, obviously, to the floor, to the governor. And essentially a little kerfuffle took place in the election committee today. I've never seen a chairman get owned so much in one session as Briscoe Cain on this issue. He keeps trying over and over and just messing up. And you might have
He's not quite ready for prime time.
Not ready for prime time. So you may have a better explanation of what actually took place today.
Sure. So, by the way, I would point people to look at HB 6, but it is not publicly online right now, so you cannot do that.
This is awful.
So Briscoe Cain in that elections committee attempted to bring up for a vote Senate Bill 7. Senate Bill 7 did pass out of the Senate of last week. And there was no notice of this. No one on the elections committee knew this was happening until like minutes before it actually happened. So it did cause a huge commotion. You could hear some of the Democratic members on that committee: Jessica Gonzalez, John Busey, Jessica. We try and keep it PG-13, so I can't quite repeat what she said. But she was not pleased about that. So Cain ultimately did pull that and then said, we'll vote on this at a later time. And then there was a press conference at the Texas AFL-CIO following that, had a lot of these same groups that have been, really laser focused on this legislation, Move Texas, Texas Civil Rights Project, Common Cause Texas. So they, were sort of denouncing this effort. John Busey was also there. And, and then there was another member, and I did not quite catch his name. He was a former member, really pointed out that, in all of his tenure in this state legislature, he had never seen sort of a chairperson do something like this. I guess it is not technically out of the procedural realm, but no chairperson would ever attempt a stunt like this. I used a lot of discretion in my headline. So even though I really wanted to go with Kane's Gambit, I did not, just because this is actually a very serious thing.
Yeah.
But and this is true. And a lot of the folks that were at that press conference from these voting rights organizations, we're also hammering home that this legislation is not popular. We've seen so many people trek to the Capitol, offer up their testimony during a pandemic because virtual wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
We've seen corporations, we've talked about this numerous times before, American Airlines,
Yeah.
Dell, that pressure people are trying to put on AT&T and other organizations like Southwest to denounce this.
Hmm.
So this has really put kind of a focus onto Texas, and even throughout Twitter. There was, I think, a brief point when Briscoe Kane was trending, which you never want to do that.
No, no, I don't think so. And I believe that the original hearing, to your point, was 22 hours or something like that, is what I heard. And usually, typically for a session, there's one or two bills that bring out that kind of attention and fervor from voters and things. But in a pandemic, that is a whole nother level that people would risk coming down and stay that long in proximity to so many other people, because this is such an important thing. And I mentioned on our staff call this morning that Black Voters Matter, one of the organizations from Atlanta or from Georgia that helped to flip that state, is now here in Texas, fighting these bills. And they have actually recently hired, I think, a state director. So I think they're going to be doing some more long-term organizing, which is really great. I had the chance to talk to one of the co-founders, Cliff Albright, and he mentioned that their thing is really getting out of the cities and get to those smaller communities that are disconnected from what's going on. And that was really great to hear, because we need a lot of that. In Austin, we have no problem turning people out. Dallas, y'all are killing it up there in terms of like getting people out to vote, really pushing the envelope on things. And Harris County, obviously, this past election cycle really did a lot of innovative things to get out the vote. But beyond those centers, we are still not doing nearly well enough. And it's going to take organizations like that to let people know that their voice counts, their voice matters, and that it's so important that we get out and vote. And I really think that these bills, and I think it was Senator Boris Miles who made this point on the Senate floor, but these bills, I hope he's right, will drive more attention. And it's like, even if you don't, like, if you have something and you don't use it, you don't care about it, but somebody walks up and tries to take it from you, it's yours, you're going to be upset about it. And I think that I'm hoping that that's the effect that these bills have, is like, well, yeah, maybe I haven't voted, but the fact that you're trying to take it away clues to me that you must think it's really important. Maybe it is really important. And there's a lot of tremendous amount of value there. And so the hope is, that these things don't pass, but we still can bring the attention that they deserve, because these are really big deals. And,
what Briscoe Kane did was incredibly, it's shady. It was done, trying to sneak this through. And I think because he knows that this is unpopular, it would have a huge impact. And I think they're kind of scared.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly how they're acting. And, they have their bills that they are championing to kind of, as red meat for the base. But as you mentioned, with these bills, they're not popular. So the other bills, like the permitless carry bill, that looked like for a moment, it actually had stalled in the Senate. Dan Patrick said it did not have the votes to lead the Senate. And so he basically established a new committee, a constitutional committee, that would hear this specific bill and maybe other bills like it. And they might as well just call it the Red Meat Committee, right? Because that's essentially what it is. And
well, don't forget Biden's also trying to take away our red meat. So that's
that's right. Yeah. Fake news, right? Yeah. Abbott tweeting that fake report from Fox News that Biden wants to limit your red meat consumption to 4 pounds
he
a
does
year.
not, folks. He does
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. That is not in the Biden plan. So, the sanctuary state for the Second Amendment is another bill that complete platitude, right? Totally meaningless. Basically, Abbott is trying to say we're not going to enforce federal law in the state of Texas. And that's what that bill is about. And he was tweeting about it today. So, meanwhile, we still haven't fixed the power grid. And there's still more stories coming out from ERCOT saying, we're going to have a heck of a summer. It's likely that we could see blackouts, brownouts, and all kinds of other things if we have a hotter than normal summer or expected summer.
Well, it's a bad thing that we live in Texas then, where it does tend to get kind of hot.
Yeah. We tend to have hot summers and have been hotter and hotter every year. So, if you plan to cook burgers, make sure you got enough propane, because your gas stove or your
maybe
electric stove.
Maybe people should turn to these plant-based burgers. I don't know how they work, but maybe.
Actually, they're really good. I've actually had the Impossible Burger, and I've had.
Really?
Yeah, there's the Impossible Burger, and then there's the other one, Beyond Meat, and I've gotten both. I think at the in the grocery store at Made Patties, and they're really good. I was skeptical, but
Okay.
but
all right. I'll keep an open mind then.
Really, yeah, do give it a try. But so one of the other major bills that they've taken, to carry the flag is the camping ban, the statewide camping ban. This is another one of those initially targeting Austin, and they're basically trying to do at the statewide level what the Republicans in Travis County are trying to do in Austin, which is basically pass a camping ban for homeless so that they can't, so essentially it would create a fine. And if they can't pay the fine, like a $500 fine, I don't know what a homeless person can pay a $500 fine, but if they can't, they will go to jail. And so in some ways it is a housing program for the homeless, but it's literally in jail. So that's not the way that we should probably do it. It's not a good long-term solution. Certainly it's not an ethical or a moral solution, but it is a good piece of red meat that they can pass around. And so there was a bill going through the House. This is I think a priority bill of the governor that would ban camping statewide. And there was a couple of points of order. This was really, a highlight of the other day, because the point of order was the Travis County Republican Party chair who signed up to testify on behalf of this bill. And he's the one pushing the campaign in Austin. And so this is his statewide bill, which he was, standing next shoulder to shoulder with, Greg Abbott, promoting this. But he was there testifying on behalf of that PAC in Austin, Save Austin Now. Well, he said to the committee that he was testifying on behalf of this organization, on two organizations, Save Austin Now and Save Austin Now PAC, two separate organizations. The way he recorded it in the sort of like the witness list for the committee, he left off one of the organizations. I think he just put Save Austin Now and he left off Save Austin Now PAC. Well, that's a point of order, because if you're speaking on behalf of an organization, you have to list that in the witness list. And so essentially he may not have killed the bill, but he certainly he prevented it from passing that day.
We're not exactly working with a bunch of Perry Masons here, is I think what we're trying to say.
Thank goodness, because I their own incompetence is sadly as or more effective than anything Democrats can do. And we've seen that over and over again with Briscoe Cain, as we mentioned earlier, how many times he's flubbed this voter suppression bill on his own account. He's messed this up. And so here you go again, another chair of Republican Party screwing up his pet bill. And point of personal privilege, my dad was one of the ones who filed this point of order. He filed this point of order. There were 2 points of order, I think, that were essentially good points of order. And it didn't permanently kill the bill, but what it did do was send the bill back to committee. And
thanks to the state representative then.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, this is really great. That I was really happy to hear that he did that. And essentially what happened was it sent the bill back to the committee, and there's only 2 weeks left at the time. This was a few days ago. There's only 2 weeks left for bills to come out of committee to get to the floor to be voted on, essentially to get to the calendar, which is there's a calendar committee for those listeners out there. Once a bill passes a committee in the House, it goes to another committee called the calendar committee. They get together and they decide on what day the full legislature, the House, will actually hear any individual bill and vote on it on the floor. And so if this bill does not leave the committee by that deadline, it basically has no path to get to the floor in time to be voted on. And so it may not be dead yet, but it is on its sort of last leg. It really needs some help. So I think folks who are watching this bill, I believe it's 1925, but if you're watching this bill, you want to look at the next committee hearing that's going to come up in next week, the first week of May. And if it's not on that call list, it's likely probably dead. But it's just one of those things we have to continue to watch. There are other avenues that they could take. Like they could take that bill and try to attach it as an amendment to another bill that's similar, but they would have to find a bill that's similar enough. And as the word is germane, they have to find a bill that's germane that it would sort of fit in with as a package. So the point being is that, yeah, they're running out of time to bring that back up. And so we may or may not see that this session.
All right, good to know.
Yeah. So that's a lot. I know we're watching a lot of the stuff. The Senate, there's a handful of police reform bills we've also been watching. I know the Senate unanimously passed a bill that would ban chokeholds by police officers. That's a good thing. The House also passed a handful of police reforms, but there's two chambers, so we really have to watch these things as they roll out and as the calendar comes to a close here. We're kind of within the last sort of throes of, bills moving before everything gets on the floor and starts being voted out and headed to the governor's desk. So
yeah, and we should probably point out, I know that we are definitely headed towards at least a special session for redistricting. That was another story. The census did officially reach did finally sort of send those results. So we have 2 congressional seats that we added, but redistricting won't take place for a while there.
Yeah, we're still watching that. Apportionment was, of course, at the beginning of the week, and apportionment basically said that Texas is going to get 2 new congressional seats. And it's very likely that with a better count and some investment from the state, which we did not receive, that we probably could have gotten 3 congressional seats. So we have Abbott to thank for sitting on his hands and not putting the resources. He didn't put resources in for the count until like late September or something like that to even start counting people. Right. Not nearly enough time, with the pandemic and everything like that, slowing things down from the start. We had a whole year and he waited to the very end to do anything. And that was intentional because his loyalty is not for the state of Texas. His loyalty is to the GOP writ large, the national party. And the way they see it, giving more seats to places like Texas means that likely Democrats are going to pick those seats up because of where you are. The growth is in North Texas in a lot of ways, and some of the towns like Plano and Frisco have really grown literally by 10x in some cases over the last 10 years. I know I saw Plano. It was either Plano or Frisco that went from like 33,000 to 300 to over 200,000 in the last 10 years. And then they actually colored the map based on the voting pattern when it was just 33,000 and the voting pattern to when it was 22,000. And these are neighboring cities. And what happened was Frisco or Plano, I think, was a little redder than Frisco. One flipped from red to blue, and the other one flipped from deep red to like pale pink. So, that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of that growth. They can only, gerrymander the line so much. So they're really concerned about that. And that's super unfortunate for us. That means a lot of money we don't get.
Oh, it's about 2. I've been researching this. So the George Washington Public Policy Institute, They estimated that a 1% undercount is $290 million over 10 years lost federal funding. That's a
Unbelievable.
lot of money.
It's a lot of money. I mean, and and we can go on and on about how much money they're costing us through not expanding Medicaid and just point after point after point. Even the things that they're complaining about on the border, there is money in the infrastructure plan. There's money Biden talked about last night in his speech that he wants to put towards technology at the border instead of a wall. And of course, they're going to fight it the whole way. We know they will. And so they don't really care about, anything but the fight and the power. And that's unfortunate. But we're going to keep them honest. We're going to keep following this. And we'll keep.
I'll be at the governor's mansion, with like a boombox playing like "Bitch Better Have My Money" by Rihanna.
Yeah, all of our money. We want it. We want every dime. But is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
I think that's about it. I see this lovely beach view that you have. I think places are opening up for travelers. So maybe we can all join Ted Cruz down in Cancun pretty soon. And hopefully he's gotten his nap in. I know he took a little.
Yeah, we need to make sure he's getting his rest.
Yeah,
there's a hate will tire you out. It's a severe activity that can be draining apparently to people. Mm-hmm. So we'll keep an eye on him and everyone else. These guys at the state capitol. And we'll keep tabs on them. So special thanks to everybody who's listening and our patrons who keep funding the Texas Signal to make sure we can do this progressive journalism. We really appreciate it. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Texas Signal and at texassignal.com, all the great reporting that we're doing. And you'll probably see even more great stuff coming out soon. Really excited about the things that we've got cooking. Lots more content, different types of content, multimedia content. I see you're always, on your Tex Mix podcast, you're always, having great guests, and you put out these little clips, these kind of like little teaser clips about what you're talking about. That stuff is super cool. Love seeing that. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it. We've got a really talented team, and they're just now getting settled in, it seems like, into their roles and really starting to stretch their legs and get really creative.
Mm-hmm. That's very exciting.
Yeah. So until next week, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye, guys.